Finance professional David Ramsey spoke with Fox News. He already bashed the idea of stimulus checks for people in the middle of a pandemic and a depression. Well, now he's going to talk about student loans.
The whole idea that student loans being forgiven is going to stimulate the economy, that assumes that people were getting ready to pay them off this year and instead would use that same $40,000 that they were getting ready to pay off their student loan and stimulate the economy with it. Again, that's economic hogwash. It's smoke and mirrors. It's simply not going to happen.
Dave, I just think there's a moral hazard doing this. You're young,
absolutely.
You signed a financial contract. You have an obligation to pay that money back.
Incredible. So they're talking about the moral hazard of eliminating or reducing student loan debt. Again, have you ever heard these guys say this when it comes to bailing out Wall Street? The government rushed in and bailed out Wall Street in the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. These are people who made the decision to bankrupt their companies and tank the global economy. They made risky bets and played hot potato with toxic assets. And then the government rushed in and bailed them out. Nobody ever said moral hazard. How are they going to learn their lesson? They're never going to learn their lesson. This is just going to happen again now. We're incentivizing bad behavior. Nobody ever said that. But when it's for students who are having trouble paying back their loans because of the freaking pandemic and economic depression, all of a sudden, moral hazard, you signed a document, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Martin Luther King said it best. We have socialism for the wealthy and rugged individualism for the poor. We have this, anarcho-capitalist laissez-faire system for the poor, where it's like, go fuck yourself if you didn't make it. If you're a small business and you go under, fuck you. If you're a giant mega multinational corporation and you go under, they rush in and get subsidized all day long because they pay their bribes to the politicians. So the politicians look out for them. But it's amazing. The mindset is amazing. So it's like, you gotta earn it. Just imagine for a second these same arguments being made about like elementary school. See, in this country, we have public school. We have elementary school, middle school, high school. We have public school. Could you imagine chastising some parents because you made a deal to pay for your kids to go to elementary school and you can't afford it? Moral hazard, we're not going to help you. The way society looks at that type of school is like, what do you mean? That's just part of being in a developed, civilized society is like we take certain things like education off the table. So to badger somebody and say you need to put yourself in financial trouble just to pay for a kid to go to school, it's absurd. It's no different for higher education. It's no different. The exact same mindset that everybody has when it comes to elementary school, middle school, and high school, just apply that to college. It's part of living in a civilized society that people need to have the opportunity to get educated, to have a shot to make it. I mean, it's really pretty simple. And then he says that if we forgive student loans, that's not going to stimulate the economy. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Because the people who have student loan debt, if you take that off the table for them, the idea that everybody's just going to save it, that's not going to happen. People are struggling. They need to pay the bills. They need to pay the mortgage, or they need to pay the rent, or maybe they need to lease a new car. That money will go towards things, so it will help the economy. Funny enough, where his argument would apply is for the ultra wealthy. That if you give them bigger tax breaks, you know what they do? They don't actually use that, I'm going to open up a new business and I'm going to invest over here and I'm going to do this over here. They don't do it. The data shows, and they've looked at this for decades now, the data shows that when you do trickle-down economics or Reaganomics, you cut taxes for the wealthy, they end up hoarding that money. And it doesn't get used in the broader economy. You can, put it in some Cayman Islands bank account. So think about that. The argument he's making, as if it applies to reducing or eliminating student loan debt, it actually applies to the wealthy, and it's a reason why you shouldn't cut taxes for the wealthy. In terms of doing it for the even the upper middle class, but definitely middle class and poor, if you help them out in any way, whether it's a stimulus check or whether it's eliminating student loan debt or reducing it, there are going to be gigantic economic upsides from that, for sure. For sure. He calls it economic hogwash. Nonsense. And by the way, this whole conversation I think is moot anyway, because as I've pointed out to you guys before, there's such a thing as a principled belief as well. You understand what I'm saying? So it's one thing to talk about, eliminating student loan debt as if it will work. Will this work? That's one conversation, the utility of it. But there's also just a conversation to be had about, should that even exist in the first place? It's like saying, if we abolish indentured servitude, will that work? Or will the work that the indentured servants did, is that so important that we kind of need the indentured servants? If you have that conversation, you sound crazy to people, right? Because we all have a principled belief that indentured servitude is wrong. So it doesn't matter if it works or there are upsides, Will it work if we get rid of Jim Crow? I mean, there's a lot of things that help the economy as part of Jim Crow. What a ridiculously immoral and unethical conversation. As a matter of principle, the Jim Crow South was incorrect. And it's the same thing with student loan debt. It's like with medical debt. Medical debt is one of the top causes of bankruptcy in the United States of America. There is no other developed country that even has a concept of medical debt. It's one of the top causes of bankruptcy here. So people could say, will universal health care work? What are the downsides of universal health care? But again, if you believe it as a matter of principle that we shouldn't have medical debt, then that whole conversation is moot anyway. Because it's like, it doesn't even matter if there are some downsides, which maybe there are, maybe there aren't. As a matter of principle, it shouldn't exist. Student loan debt shouldn't exist. Medical debt shouldn't exist. That's not too much to ask for a civilized society. But look at how they talk about it. The idea, they really try to make people believe that it's dumb to want to get rid of student loan debt, that it's stupid, that you're ridiculous if that's something you believe. Meanwhile, look at all the money we spend on bailing out Wall Street. Look at all the money we spend on the military-industrial complex. Guys, just a few years ago, they passed an increase in the military budget. They do it every year, by the way. But a few years ago, they did an $80 billion increase from year to year in the military budget. And there was a bill for free college. You know how much it cost? About $60 billion. You could have had free college for the entire country for just the increase from one year to the next in the military budget, and not a single person said, how are we going to pay for that? That's too expensive. They just did it. So you could just do it, and it's cheaper with free college, but that's when they tried out all these, how are you going to pay for it? I don't even know how we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it. They only trot it out when it's something to help the people. If it's endless war, they just view it as why are we even having the conversation about how we could pay for it? It's a moral necessity, so we have to do it anyway. That's the fucking point when it comes to things that really matter, like education, like healthcare. That's how people should be viewing these things. And also, by the way, that's not even perfectly analogous, because at least when it comes to healthcare, we save trillions of dollars if we move to a Medicare for all system. That's not me speaking. That's a study from the University of Massachusetts Amherst speaking. So, Jesus, it's so frustrating. Look at how smug and elitist these people are. They're not your friend. They don't care about the working class. Every now and then they'll posture they're for the regular guy and gal, but it's not true. It's not true, and this is such a clear example of it.